ॐ यो देव सवितास्माकं धियो धर्मादिगोचराः प्रेरयेत्तस्य यद्भर्गः तद्वरेण्यम् उपास्महे।
भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। We continue with the 18th shloka of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There is Gita Dhyanam, so we will do that a little bit and then go to the verse. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayana Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitavritavarshiniim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayiniim Ambatva Manusandadharmi Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshiniim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Phullaravindaayata Patranetra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradeepaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gītāmృతదుహే Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsah Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gītāmృతం Mahat Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. Om. Okay. We are in the 18th verse, which is Karmanya karmayah pashyed akarmani cha karmayah sa buddhiman manushyeshu sa yuktaha kritsna karma prade. The one who sees actionlessness in action and action in actionlessness is wise among human beings. That person is a yogi who has done everything that needs to be done. So we saw different arguments. The essence of the verse, the actual meaning of the verse is the one who sees actionlessness in action. That means when the body and the mind is active in whatever action, he is seeing the truth of the self, which is fundamentally actionless. One who sees his own self as the non-doer. Naham karta, I am not the doer. And also I am not the enjoyer of the result of action. When you are not the doer means it is understood that you are not the enjoyer also. Okay? And then the one who sees action in inaction. Here inaction refers to the state of the body and mind where the person is not doing anything, apparently, simply sitting. So let's say I don't want to do anything, I am bored of doing everything. I want to take a break and I want to chill out, the person says. So in this so-called chilling out, he sees that this chilling out is also an action because there is the ahankara, there is the sense of I am not doing anything. I am not doing is also a sense of doership. What are you doing? I am not doing anything, I am simply sitting. You know, there is a why ahankara? In relaxation also there is ahankara. There is a popular anecdote. You see that Sardarji, this person with turban who are always shown in British movies to drive taxi and all that, Singh. Sardarji. Their surname is Singh. Okay, they are not taxi drivers. Okay, they are a community who are very illustrious people everywhere. Okay, this their name always ends with some Singh. So this Sardarji was relaxing in Miami Beach. So his friend come, "Oh sir, are you relaxing? He said, no, I am Milkha Singh. I am Milkha Singh. I am not relaxing. You get it?
No.
Singh is the surname of Sardarjis. They are always, for example, India's Prime Minister is Manmohan Singh, Milkha Singh, Karan Singh, Jaswinder Singh. So they asked him, are you relaxing? No, I am Milkha Singh. So in the relaxing also, there is ahankara. So the person sees that the abhimanam, the idea that I am not doing anything is attachment to the body and mind, it is a limitation. Suppose you are relaxing in the time when you are supposed to do work. You feel guilty. Oh my God, I am supposed to be there in that place doing this thing, but I am not doing anything. I don't feel like going where I am sitting in the house. You are not sitting in the house in peace. You are sitting in the house guilty. So, the non-action also gives a result. What it is not supposed to give. You are getting what you don't want to get. It is like not brushing the teeth for 10 days, develops tata, develops plague. That is, non-action also gives a result. So, he sees that action in non-action. In the sense, because non-action of the body and mind does not really mean non-action. So that means he sees the spirit of non-action, the spirit of actionlessness. He sees exactly what it means to be actionless. Actionlessness means not the actionlessness of the body and mind. Then you may say, what about Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Who is in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? I was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 10 days. That means the body and the mind was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 10 days and you thought you are the body and mind. That means ignorance. So, here it means all kinds of non-action up to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, from starting from chilling out in the beach up to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, all non-action, all those states of the body and mind that are considered as non-action or actionlessness is mentioned. So, he understands actionlessness is not the quiet state of the body and mind. Actionlessness is an understanding that my own true nature as the Atma, Satchitananda Atma, I am actionless. So this is this understanding of the nature of the self to be actionless. Atma Akriya, Atma Akarta. This knowledge that the self is the non-doer. That knowledge. Self being the nature of consciousness and self-existent reality, it does nothing. All the actions are apparent appearances of the different structures that are dependent upon consciousness. No? There is a pot, one clay pot, another clay pot. So a person wants to have some fun. So he took both the clay pot and broke it. Pang. So this clay pot hit the other clay pot and both the clay pot broke. The pots broke, but the clay did not break. Similarly, all action pertains to the mind and body. All non-action, which is perceived non-action, pertains to the mind and body, while the self is neither action nor non-action of the mind and body. The self is not defined by the state of the mind and body. This is the understanding. Now, for this, there are a lot of objections that are arising. The Karmakanda person, the ritualistic school person, will not keep quiet. He will say, no. Here he is only telling that the one who sees actionlessness in action, which means whenever the action is done without a desire for result as a dedication to God, that action does not give the desired result to the jiva, the one who is doing the action. So the result of this action will not carry forward after death. So the result of these actions, be it good karma or bad karma, will not carry forward as a good karma that will create next birth. The one who sees action in actionlessness means when you are not doing what you are supposed to do because of laziness or whatever, this not doing the prescribed actions. There are these rituals prescribed. Okay, these prescribed religious rituals are there, which everybody is supposed to do. So if you are not doing them, you incur the sin of omission of what is supposed to be done. Because of that omission, you will go to hell. You did not, you gave up your responsibilities, so you will go to hell. Because anything that produces the result is considered action. Action is something that produces a result. Because not doing produces the result of taking the person to hell after death, it is considered as action. Action, even though it is action, is not producing the required result for the individual. It is as good as non-action. This is one interpretation. Shankaracharya says this interpretation is wrong. That is not the intended meaning here. Because what is the purpose? The one who sees this truth is liberated. That is the purpose. Krishna Karma Krita, he has accomplished all that needs to be accomplished, which means Jivan Mukti, which means liberation while you are alive. Because this is told here simply by having this knowledge. So simply by having the knowledge that selfless action will not give result and not doing the right action will give me hell. Just by this knowledge, how come a person becomes an all-accomplished person? Cannot become. But on the contrast, if it is means the knowledge of the self, when does a person become Kritakritya, the one who has accomplished all that needs to be accomplished? When does one become Etad Buddha Buddhimancha Kritakrityascha Bharata? The one who knows this is one who has attained all that needs to be attained, one who knows what the true nature of the self. So all the scriptures talk only about this. No? The one who has seen the true nature of the self achieves everything. Everything is achieved. He has nothing more to be achieved. He has no regrets. This is being repeatedly told in almost every Upanishad and also repeatedly in many places in Bhagavad Gita. So here the intended meaning is not this perception of the ritualistic people. It is not the intended meaning here, because if this is the intended meaning, then that knowledge is not capable of giving the state of having accomplished everything. Because it does not give the promise, it cannot give the promised result, it is not what is talked about here. What will give you the status of achieving everything? Is it possible to achieve everything as an achievement? It means it has to be already achieved. We know that the knowledge, the nature of the self is the nature of moksha is eternal. Liberation is something eternal. Being eternal, it is not a product of an action that is achieved in time. Since being eternal, the product of an action that is achieved in time cannot be eternal. So this being eternal cannot be a result of action which is achieved in time. Okay? The nature of the self is eternal. Whose nature is moksha, whose nature is liberation, the state of not being bound by anything. Being not bound by anything, it is by itself in its own nature free. So, something that is not a result of a set of actions cannot be achieved by actions, which is one of the main points in Mundaka Upanishad. It talks about Nastya Akrita Kritena, it comes in Mundaka Upanishad. Not being a result of action, he goes to the Guru and approaches him for knowledge. So what is not a result of action has to be discovered in knowledge. It has to already be there. So how to attain what is already attained? You can attain what is already attained only by knowledge, like a woman who forgot her sunglasses in the beach. Where is my sunglass? She cannot search and find the sunglass because she has not lost it. The more she searches, the farther she goes away from the glass. All she has to understand is to discover the glass that she has not lost it. So gaining what is already gained happens by knowledge. In the case of the woman who apparently forgot the sunglass, the knowledge is visual perception that the sunglass is only on my head. The means of knowledge. In the case of self-realization, the means of knowledge is the scripture, the teaching of the Mahavakya that you are that. So the revelation of your nature through the systematic teaching based on the Mahavakya shows you the true nature of yourself, and through that knowledge you recognize what you are, and this recognition, this knowledge is achieving everything, means achieving that which is everything. Only by knowing the true nature of the self, a person accomplishes all that needs to be accomplished. Because the self being of the nature of completeness, Purnam. Because the self is Purnam, it is completeness in every way. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Existence, knowledge, infinite. Infinite existence, infinite knowledge, infinite in every way. Infinite happiness. In the sense, infinite happiness means absence of any kind of limitation, bondage or sorrow. So, one's own Swarupa. By realizing the knowledge of one's own Swarupa alone can make a person accomplish all that needs to be accomplished. So here that is what is meant here. Because of the virtue of self-knowledge, the person sees actionlessness in action. He sees the nature of the self not being affected by action. The presence or absence of the actions of the body and mind do not bind the self, do not affect the self in any way. This knowledge makes the person free, and that person who has this knowledge has accomplished all that needs to be accomplished. That is the intended meaning. Then also, one important argument Sri Shankaracharya is giving here, which points to the attitude with which we approach the Vedic knowledge. The attitude with which we approach the Vedic knowledge. In this context, I would like to remind you of the three conditions. When you accept Veda as Pramana, as valid knowledge, there are three conditions. Abhadigatatvam, Anadigatatvam, Phalatvam. Abhadigatatvam. It is not contradictory. What is told is not contradictory to what I already clearly know by perception and reasoning. Okay? And what is told is impossible to be arrived at clearly by the virtue of perception and reasoning. What the Veda talks about, you cannot know by your perception and reasoning. No amount of scientific investigation can prove it nor disprove it. Neither can you prove it, nor can you disprove it, nor can you discover it. I will find it by my own scientific investigation. You will never find it. The self cannot be found through any kind of instrument because you are the one who are already operating the instrument. The instrument can show you anything outside, but no instrument can show you to yourself, because you are self-evident to yourself, and you cannot know your own nature by your own mind, because mind itself is dependent on the self. So it has to be given only through teaching. So the Veda, whatever the Veda talks about, is not available, not even self-knowledge, even the mystical, ritualistic details are not available for scientific investigation. It is not available for perception and reasoning. These two conditions. Then the third condition, that is what Shankaracharya invokes here, Phalatvam. It has to be a useful information. If it is not, the Veda does not tell you anything that is useless. It does not tell you in the heaven there are ants with white legs whose nails are pink. Unless you are an insectologist, it is not important. Unless you are somebody who wants to be an insectologist after death also, who is the insectologist in heaven. Unless you are having that weird wish, this information is not relevant at all. So Veda does not contain this kind of useless information. Heaven, the roads are paved with gold. It's useless information because you cannot do anything with the gold in heaven on earth. If I can go to heaven and bring some gold here, it can make some sense. Useful information. Okay, but I can use the gold in heaven. In a place where all the roads are made of gold, what is the value of gold? The same as the value of silicon, what we have here, mud. So gold is as good as mud. So I cannot sell gold in heaven because everybody can pick up some gold from the road. So what will I do with that gold? So in heaven the roads are paved with gold is a useless information. Veda will not give such useless information. Why I told this, you might know. If you do some research on the heaven, the roads are paved with gold, do some Google, you will know why I told this. Okay. Now, that's what he's going to say here now. In this argument, from the mere negation like the non-performance of obligatory action, a positive entity like sin of omission cannot arise. So after telling that, see, the ritualistic view is not what is talked about here. Then he also gives one more argument. Simply by not doing the obligatory action. Because here, it contributes to a huge guilt for a sannyasi. If a sannyasi does not understand this, a person who has renounced the ritualistic religion for the purpose of knowledge does not understand this point, the person will die of guilt. There will be no knowledge. So he is telling a very important point here. He says, simply by not doing a prescribed ritualistic action, one does not go to hell. It is because of the side effects. Okay. Because I don't do what needs to be done, I end up doing what should not be done. My mind gets corrupted. My ignorance gets strengthened. My habit patterns get strengthened. My desires and indulgences become strong, and because of that I will end up in adharma, and because of that I go to hell. Simply by not doing the prescribed ritual, a person does not go to hell. So that's what is told here. Why? The logic is non-action, not doing something is not a positive entity. I did not do. Absence of something is called abhava. Okay? Asat, abhava. It is not there. So how a positive entity that exists, like experience in hell, is a positive entity. Okay? Something that has being. How can being come out of non-being? It is not possible. If you say being comes out of non-being, it amounts to telling non-being can become being and being can become non-being. If you say non-being, it is like telling I made a pot from nothing. I cannot make a pot from nothing. I can make a pot from clay, I can make a pot from plastic, I can make a pot from steel, I can make a pot of gold, silver. I cannot make a pot from nothing. Or I can make a pot from my thought. I can imagine a pot. I made a pot with nothing. No, you made the pot with the energy of your mind. Okay, I will shut down your mind. I will make you fast for 10 days. Let me see if you can make the same pot. You reduce the sugar level voltage in the brain. 12 volt voltage is there. I reduce that voltage. You cannot make the pot. I remember in Shivaratri when we are keeping awake for the whole night. Next day, I could not chant the mantra. The mantra, mind was not able to conceive the mantra because there is no energy. It wants to sleep. Because it was awake all the time. Once the final puja is over, subconscious mind clicks, now sleep. But then after clicking that now sleep, I remembered I have to do some ritual, morning ritual. So then I went with this. Already subconscious mind wants to sleep, it has gone to bed. So now I want to do the ritual, the mind is not cooperating, it doesn't come because the energy is not available. So even if I have to conceive a pot in my mind, abstract pot, like a mathematician, a point that moves in space, which follows the equation x squared plus y squared equal to a squared. It is the circle, no? So a mathematician conceives of different shapes only as equations in the mind. That also cannot be done because that is also having a material, which is your own consciousness. So without being, there cannot be another being. A being, a positive existence cannot arise out of non-existence. It's a very fundamental philosophical principle. Okay? So that's what he's saying here. So a non-action, not doing something is an absence of action. So absence of action cannot produce a result by itself. This is one argument. And then, why this is very important? Because when a person becomes a sannyasi, when a person becomes a monk, the person renounces the ritualistic religion. Okay? They are not having any obligatory spiritual practices other than study and contemplation. There is no obligation, absolutely no obligation on the person. Your only job is to be committed to the knowledge of the self, to the exclusion of everything else. If you want to do some practice, it's your prerogative because you want to control your mind or whatever, as an accessory for knowledge. But there are no binding rituals. For example, if a person has a deity in the house, if you have a deity in the house, you are supposed to take care of the deity. You are supposed to do puja in the morning or evening, in the sandhya kalam, these kind of things are there. Suppose if you are a person who has completely renounced only for the sake of liberation and knowledge, you don't need to maintain even that. So they will give up the ritualistic worship and other things also. We have saw a lot of ritualistic things in the Vedic place, that sandhya vandana, it's called nitya karma. The person gives up. So when you give up that nitya karma, you have been doing it all your life. Suddenly you feel, oh my God, I am not doing what needs to be done. It's like, I know a story, I think I told you before. A person became a monk and suddenly he realized that is the day for doing the offering for his father, dead father, and ancestor ritual. So he got suddenly guilty, oh my God, today I am supposed to do. And he ran to his guru who gave sannyasa. And he said, Master, I have to do this ritual now. What to do now? How to do? Please arrange. Whom should I approach? He said, you don't need to do that ritual because you are a monk. In fact, you should not do that ritual. You have already renounced. You have nothing to do with family. You have nothing to do with anybody. You don't have any father. You don't have any mother. You don't have nothing. You are not the doer. You just don't need to do anything. No, but I feel restless. Because the guilt. Oh my God, I have not done what needs to be done. Because it's a machine. Once it has been programmed to do in a certain way, it's like a donkey. It wants to do the same thing again and again without thinking. No? So to avoid that. So this argument is very useful in this context. To know that simply by not doing one's obligatory action, one does not go to hell. Wow. And second, one more point. Also, the Shastra, the scripture may not enjoin useless work as this is but pain. Also, what the Shastra says, Nitya Karma, the obligatory ritual gives no result. We saw that. So there are two things talked about here. Then what the Karma Kanda fellow is saying, what the ritualistic school is saying, it's saying, the verse is telling you that the knowledge that obligatory action gives no result when done as a dedication to God. This is what it says, and also it says not doing the obligatory action gives the result of going to hell. If this is the interpretation, the scripture is teaching something absolutely useless. Why? First of all, hell cannot come from non-action because something cannot come from nothing. Existence cannot come from non-existence, so that part is gone. Now the other part, what about obligatory ritual done selflessly gives no result? What kind of injunction is this? See, why should I do something that is useless? If it does not give me any result, then why should I do it? So the phalatvam, the phalatvam means the result orientedness is very important. Anything that is prescribed by the Veda is supposed to give me some kind of a result. So he says, see, if I do this, it is useless. Now, because when I don't do this, also it gives me help. What is this? Because to do the obligatory action is not easy. See, I do something with a lot of difficulty, I take a very bitter tablet in the hope of curing my headache. And then this tablet is bitter. If you eat it, nothing will happen. So will you eat it? So this is like the Shastra telling you, this everyday ritual should be done, it will give you no result. If you don't do, you will go to hell. What kind of teaching is this? What is the use of this Veda then? The Veda is telling me to do something, what I have to get up before the sunrise, in the winter, and do my ritual. And in the middle of the afternoon, I have to do the afternoon ritual and only then eat food. In the evening, before dinner, I have to do the evening ritual. And then during the eclipse time, before the eclipse and after the eclipse, I have to take bath. No matter when the eclipse is. Like this, lot of rituals are there. So if I, for example, I should not, if I want to, no matter whether it is winter or whatever, if I go for a toilet, I have to wash my mouth 16 times. Like this, you have a lot of obligatory rituals. Okay. And I should, while taking bath, I should chant this mantra. And all the time I should wear 3 clothes on the body. Endless. If you read Dharma Shastra, this ritualistic portion which talks about what are the different obligatory things to be done, you will hang yourself. Because 90% of that cannot be practiced in our lifestyle today, you will only end up being guilty. So, Shastra is telling you to do a lot of things which are very difficult. So, it is very painful to live the ritualistically correct life. So, by doing it, I am going through pain. Now, if I don't do it, okay, I don't do it, I am sitting on, I have no pain. No, after death you will go to hell. They will be roasting you in a hot oven. That also is pain. So, Shastra is giving me something which will produce pain now or it will produce pain later. So, what is this useless teaching? Shastra does not do this. Veda gives you something for my welfare. All the teachings or whatever the Veda gives me is something that is of a positive use, something that is a desirable. It gives me a desirable result. Veda does not talk about things that give me undesirable result. So it is going against the very spirit of the Veda. So this cannot be the interpretation of this verse. So this argument is very important to understand what is action. Like for example, the person attains to self-knowledge before getting committed to a family life, or before getting committed to building an ashram or building an institution or whatever. Before getting committed to some long-term agreement, this person attains self-knowledge. He will not undertake anything further. He will renounce everything and become a mendicant. And he will just live for the subsistence of the body through begging or whatever. That's the minimal action that is required for survival. And the person remains always committed to the vision of the self in the practice of samadhi. It's not a practice. Samadhi is a natural result of commitment to knowledge. Okay? In keeping with this, the next verse of Bhagavad Gita, which is
निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्व परिग्रहः शरीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वन्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम्. Free from expectations, controlling the mind and the buddhi, and the self means the active personality, and the mind, renouncing all possessions, the person who does but an exclusive form of physical action alone incurs no sin. Okay. The person who is free from expectations, whose body, mind and senses have been mastered, who has given up all possessions, doing only action that sustains the body, does not incur any sin. Here sin means, kilbisham means any kind of limitation. It means this sin here includes good karma and bad karma. Even dharma, the punya, the result of good action, is also considered as sin by the wise because it is of a binding nature. Oh, I did a lot of charity. May all the good karma that results from that, all the result of this good karma, may it all come to me in the form of the result of good karma that protects me and takes care of me. No? The unseen result of good actions. Let it protect me, let it give me heaven, let it give me, come with me after my death. For example, a person who is committed to a ritualistic life, religious life, is supposed to remember at the deathbed. No? Is supposed to remember may I remember all the good deeds that I did. May I remember all the yajnas that I did. May I remember all the oblations I gave to all the gods. No? He invokes all the actions and he invokes his ownership over all the virtuous actions he did. So, the front end of the mind that is leaving the body is very active. So, he is invoking the set of karmas that are driven by virtue through the personal will. And he is very conscious about that while leaving the body. Then, all these karmas produce the transmigration. They decide the course of transmigration. What will happen to the person after death. So what is the state of mind while dying decides what will happen to you after death. So, this kind of good karma also produces results like heaven and enjoyments and other things which is nothing but another embodiment. Whatever may be the embodiment, it is nothing compared to the self. See, for a pauper, one who is empty pocket, 100 RON is great. So you give 100 RON for somebody with an empty pocket. It's an achievement, they're happy. Somebody already has 10,000 RON in the pocket. You give do that person, it's pointless to that person. Right? So it's a relative thing. Now, there is a person who is free from anything to do with wealth. The person has renounced the desire for wealth or prosperity completely. He does not see any point in that. He is completely contented. Whether there is money in the pocket or not does not matter. So here, a sannyasi is a person who sees the self as infinite, who has the vision of oneself as the infinite. For a person who has the vision of oneself as the infinite, golden, even it's like a parrot who is free from the cage, who is flying free in the forest. The parrot that is flying free in the forest, you tell, I will give you a very nice cage. It's made of gold,
and you have velvet bed in that, every day I will give you one little nut to munch. Ah, that's nice. You don't have to run around the forest looking for food. Oh, okay, that's great. Can I fly where I want? No, no. Only the catch is you will be inside the cage all the time. I don't want the cage. But suppose there is a parrot which is in a small cage, where they sell in the pet shops. It has no place to move, nothing. Then it is stuck there. And from there, you release the parrot into this bird sanctuary. They maintain this huge enclosure in a zoological park where you have like around half an acre or 1 acre with a covered, it's a covered dome. Inside which the birds are flying. It's definitely much better than a cage. So the bird which is in a small cage may desire that. But the bird flying free in the sky in the forest, for that, even that big dome is a bondage. Similarly, for a sage who has realized the infinite nature of the self, good karma is also equally painful like bad karma. Because of realizing the infinite nature. So this person incurs no sin. In the sense, he does not incur good karma as well as bad karma, because the person has he is given up all sense of possessions. So he does action only that sustains the body. If he happens to do virtuous action, like teaching for example, there is no good karma. If he does apparently some sinful action, so called, you hit the mosquito by mistake, then or while walking you are stamping on so many insects, they all die, that is all bad karma. These things don't affect the person because he is free from the sense of doership. Being free from ahankara, there is no result of action that is binding on the individual. He does not do anything even though fully engaged in action. So here we will go a little bit into the commentary. Here, the one whose mind and yatachittatma, the one who is self-controlled, mastered oneself, means the one who has mastered the organs of action and the one who has mastered the ways of the thinking of the mind, shamadama. So here it means shama and dama. Before we saw the sage who has realized even after you know the nature of the self, you are supposed to be devoted to the lifelong perfection of shama and dama. Since restricting the active organs of action, restricting the organs of perception, and restricting the movements of the mind, means having a mastery over the movements of the mind, not allowing oneself to slip into indulgence. This is what we saw in Viveka Chudamani, Monday class. So the last Viveka Chudamani, this is the topic we are dealing with. How an enlightened person should live his life after the knowledge. The devotion to the enlightenment, the commitment to the enlightenment means Shama Shakya Sampati, the Shamadama, the sense control and the mind control and the mastery of the different aspects of the active personality to be kept together and not let loose. That is a very important aspect of being committed to self-knowledge. So mind is the inner organ and the self means the external psychophysical organism as a whole. This person who has controlled both these is referred to here, means he is a sannyasi. He has given up all possessions. The sole aim of his physical action is the maintenance of the body alone. He has no sense of doership in that action also. He goes to beg. The sannyasi is allowed by the scripture to go and beg in 3 houses, 5 houses, something. Different rooms for begging are there. There are basically 2 categories of subsistence. Like for example, the next verse says, content with what is gained by chance beyond dualities, without the competitive spirit, equal-minded in gain and loss, that person is not bound in spite of working. That is the next verse. So content with whatever comes. Here it means there are 2 kinds of approaches given to a renunciate. Ajagari, Madhukari. Ajagari means the python. The python snake, the big anaconda python. The python attitude or the bee attitude, honey bee attitude. Honey bee, it goes from flower to flower, takes the food. Does not, that's the honey bee style. The python, it just sits in its place, does nothing. When something comes in its way, it grabs. So there are 2 kinds of renunciates. One person, he does not go anywhere. he sits in one place. If somebody comes and gives food, he will eat. Nobody gives food, he will not eat. He will not ask also. There are some people who are extreme in this. People have put food in their mouth. Ramana Maharshi was like this. They took him out, then they made him okay, and then they poured some water in the mouth and all that. They gave him bath. Somebody will give him bath. Somebody will give him food. After some time, then the system became a little active. Then he will take whatever is given. He will not go and beg also. So there are some people who go and beg. For example, you have parivrajaka sannyasis, the wandering mendicants. The wandering mendicants have some rule. Like for example, the Buddhist monks who go to the village to beg. They will go to the village and they will beg. And here they have rules for Paramahamsa. You are supposed to beg only in 3 houses. And that also, after the sound of all the vessels washing has subsided in the village. When the food and everything is over, ladies, they wash the vessels and keep. In India, all the vessels are made of steel, so you hear a lot of sound. So, when the sound of all the vessel washing is gone, then the person goes for bhiksha. That means, if any food is left over, they will give you. You are not a competitor. You are not a burden for society. So, you cannot say a sannyasi is a parasite. A sannyasi is not a parasite. Because the person is not a burden for society. And even that kind of begging, you are supposed to ask for food only 3 times in front of a house. After asking for 3 times, if nothing comes from inside the house, you are supposed to move to the next house. This is the rule. And like that, you can ask only 3 houses. Whatever comes in that comes. Nothing comes, you go back to your place and sit. And you are not supposed to stay for more than 3 nights in the same village. You have to keep going. So like this, there are a lot of rules. It's not easy to be a sannyasi. That is why they say, unless you have achieved endurance and equanimity of mind, you cannot become a monk. So sannyasa is very difficult to achieve without karma yoga. That's what they say. If you really want to be the sannyasi in spirit and in action, it's not easy joke. So this person can choose this way or that way, according to the tradition and the advice of the guru, whoever gives sannyasa. Person chooses one or this or that. And that action also is only for the sake of survival. Then will that action give bad karma? For example, let us say, the person who gives food, that food has been acquired by unfair means. Dishonest businessman. He acquired food by exploiting a lot of people. So that sinful karma is there in the food. Because I took food from that house, will I be affected? No. Because that action will not affect me because I am not the body, I am not the mind. Because of being rooted in self-knowledge, the action and the result of action that is done, which is minimal action done for physical survival, that also does not affect the jnani. There is a story of a master. I think this is Shankaracharya's story, but they say attribute the story to different masters. I don't know who. You have to understand the spirit of it. A master and his disciples, they were walking in the forest village, they were wandering. The master was very thirsty, so he asked for something to drink. And that fellow, instead of giving, he wanted to give a pot full of ayran, buttermilk. Instead of that, by mistake, he brought a pot full of coconut tree liquor. It's called a toddy. They tap from the coconut. He gave that. So he drank that. He did not, he is in the contemplation, he does not know what is being given. What are the big? He just drank. And then the disciples saw that, hey, master is drinking toddy. Let's have some fun also. Let's also drink. Then everybody happily drank toddy. And they all got drunk. And, nice. Master himself is drinking toddy, let me drink toddy. Master saw this. Kept walking. Another place he was very thirsty. In one foundry, the person was pouring molten iron to make some implements. He took some molten iron in the hand and then drank it. And then looked at the disciples. So, this what happens to a jnani, an enlightened person, is very mysterious, and it is not to be taken literally. So the actions don't bind literally. The person see these are all demonstrations based on siddhis. The person has some mystic powers because of the practice of yoga. So has some control over the elements. So he uses this to demonstrate a point. So what we need to take from this is the point that actions does not bind the jnani. So the self is not bound by the action and the result of action done by the body and the mind. So that is the point here.
Then the next verse. The one who is happy with whatever comes by chance, yadricha labha santushto dvandvatito vimatsarah samah siddhava siddhau cha kritva api na nibadhyate. The one who is happy with whatever comes by chance, who is not affected by the pairs of opposites, who is free from vimatsa, the one who is free from jealousy and is even-minded. Jealousy means the qualities like jealousy, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, manamacharya, the desire, anger, jealousy, etc. All these qualities. And who is even-minded with reference to success and failure. One person will say, oh, you are a great master, we are so lucky that you are walking in our village, and then they will do all puja. Then you go to the next village, it will be Muslim village. Some fellow will come and cut your hand, or somebody will throw mud at you, they will throw some stone at you, you are a heathen or whatever. If you go to the evangelic village, they will do something else. And then you go to the next village, again they will worship you. You are supposed to keep equanimity also. Not the person is not affected by all that. Somebody is a reformist, communist, Indian communist. He thinks everybody should work. This guy looks so well built and everything. Why is he begging? He is not supposed to beg. He is supposed to do your work. Mr. Monk, why don't you better earn your food? Why don't you wash my car and I give you lunch? You can say thank you and keep working. Because that fellow does not understand what is sannyasa and all that, you cannot give him a lesson because he has no shraddha, he is a communist. Why do you talk to the fellow? So keep going. So because it is all part of life and the jnani takes everything in the even-minded spirit. Whatever, when a person gives a negative comment or a negative action, it is also for the body and mind, not for the self. When a person gives a positive comment and a positive thing, that is also for the body and mind, not for me. So the jnani, understanding the true nature of the self, does not take upon himself whatever is attributed, directed towards his body and mind. Also, he is even-minded. And he lives by chance whatever comes, because Sankalpa Sannyasi, he has given up all sense of personal will. Having given up all sense of personal will and all sense of possessions, both practically and cognitively, the person cannot have anything. Not having anything, not working for anything. How to live? You live only by chance. Take life as it comes. Now, if you are a karma-yogi, if you are an active person also, cognitively you live like this. You may be looking like you are working for a lot of results, for the welfare of the world or whatever. But you are not actively planning to get something tomorrow. You are only grounded in the reality of the commitment of the body and mind in this given moment. Of course, with the big picture or in time in the background. But there is no idea of self-definition. There is no self-definition that comes from the achievement of success and failure. When your self-definition does not come from success and failure, you will not be affected by the success and failure. If you really carefully watch yourself, how you are affected by the success and failure of your actions? Because it affects your sense of self somehow. Are you affected by the success and failure of somebody who is 3 streets away whom you don't know? In a given moment, when you are successful in something, let us say, for example, there is a boxing match. One person wins, one person loses. The person who wins is happy, the person who loses is unhappy. Now, the person who wins, why the person is happy, why the person is not sad that the other person has lost? So the winning is delightful because of the idea I am the winner. It makes my little miserable ego bloat out a little bit. So if I am having a failure, I am already miserable. It makes my miserable ego much more miserable. So I am miserable because of failure. So I own up the result of action on me. That is why I am affected by success and failure. If there is no sense of ownership over the result of action, which is when there is no self-definition that comes from success and failure, the mind is not emotionally affected by success and failure. Of course, if there is a failure, you may plan differently for the next time as part of the strategy of action. Now you are running an NGO and then something goes wrong. You will take that result into account for the purpose of practical, objective planning.
But you will not define yourself based on success or failure. That is what is meant here. If you are an active person, you have to take it like this. If you are a sannyasi, obviously you have that attitude. Of course, you are not working for anything, and so you live by chance. Actually, it means even if the body cannot be maintained, they don't care. That is the actual thing. A real sannyasi, if the body has to die, it dies. They don't care. Yeah. Then the karma of the one who is free from attachment, who is liberated, whose mind is rooted in self-knowledge, who performs for the sake of the daily yajna, resolves totally. Now he is going to the next point. Which is Jagat Gata Sangasya Muktasya Jnanavastita Chetasah Yajnaya Charatah Karmaha Samagram Praviliyate. The karma, the actions of the one who is free from attachment, who is liberated, whose mind is rooted in the self-knowledge, who performs for the sake of everyday yajna, that karma dissolves totally. Here he is talking about a karma yogi, the person who is devoted to active life, but rooted in self-knowledge. Giving up attachment to the result of action, in this verse is set forth the absence of action. For the one who is due to action continues to work as some occasion or the other for it arises. He does this in spite of the realization of the inactive nature of the Brahman as his own self. As such, renunciation of all actions is appropriate for the person. In fact, he has had the perception that there is neither a real agent nor work nor supposed to be served, nor a purpose to be served by it. In spite of his continuing to work, he does nothing at all. For such a person, okay. So the person once realized the nature of the self. The recommended way of life is renunciation only. Then why did Lord ask Arjuna to fight? Because that was the context. He had already committed the fighting, he had started the fighting. So there is a collective purpose to be achieved, to set an example and all that, and also he is a Kshatriya. And his mind was clouded by likes and dislikes. They are my people, I am theirs. How can I kill my uncle and grandfather and teacher? How can I kill my cousin brothers? I and mine is there. So you have to go through the whole process till that whole virus is cleared and debugged from your head. So you have to fight. That does not mean everybody who has self-knowledge has to go out in the world and fight. No, it's not like that. So that means the person once has the vision of the self is ready to renounce. Is qualified to become a renunciate and just walk out of everything. But if the person has to do some action, there is no sense of doership in the action because of the same point, but in different contexts it's being said. He whose attachment has vanished, Gata Sangasya, means the one whose association with the body mind is over, the one whose association with doership of the action, and one whose association with the result of action has disappeared for that person. That person has achieved liberation, all bondage due to virtue and non-virtue has fallen off. All the bondage that arises due to virtue and the lack of virtue, dharma and adharma has fallen off. And this person's mind is established in the knowledge. He works as a yajna. So whatever action he does is a yajna. What is yajna? Yajna is anything that is done with the spirit of devotion for a selfless purpose. Any action done with the spirit of devotion and shraddha for a selfless purpose is yajna. Yajnanam japa yajñosmi, japa is a yajna. Anything done for either its own sake or for the sake of a motive, for anything that is given as an offering to the divine is a yajna. So wherever the devas and Ishvara is involved, yajna, that is yajna. So here yajna here means a selfless action. So yajna is that which sustains the world. So any action of a jnani is considered as a yajna. In the Shankaracharya movie, he was singing a poem. O goddess, may my walking be the circumambulation of your temple. May my sleeping be the prostration done. May my sleep be the samadhi. May the words that I speak be your mantra. Which means whatever I speak, take it as me chanting your mantra. Wherever I walk, consider that I am going to your temple. Whatever I eat, consider that I am offering you as an offering. Nevedyam. And then he says, whatever I see, consider that I am looking at your divine form in the temple. That means whatever the person is there, the jnani is completely tuned to the totality. Ennuru yavum irayuruvamena enni irutthala undipara ishanadu pujai undipara Ramana Maharshi. Whatever you see, whatever you think of, if you think of that as the reality of the whose reality is the Lord, then that thinking itself is worship of the Lord. It's Ramana Maharshi's Upadesha Saramita. This is the mental. So whatever this person does is yajna. So all the actions and the result of actions, they perish. That means they don't hang on around the ego and produce transmigration. They don't produce a personalized result. Why does this work done like this fail to produce a result? Instead they wholly get resolved because Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam Brahmaivadena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. You remember this? This is one verse that you remember very well. Okay. The means of sacrificial, the means of that which is, the means of offering is Brahman. Brahmarpanam. The act of offering, that which is offered is Brahman. The act of offering is Brahman. Brahmarpanam. The act of the very action of offering is Brahman. I think the translation is better with Swamiji. The means of offering is Brahman. The oblation is Brahman. That which is that thing which is offered is Brahman. The one who offers it, it is being offered by Brahman into the fire which is also Brahman. Brahman indeed is to be reached by the person who sees everything as Brahman. It's a very, very profound verse which we will see in the next class. Since I have chanted Brahmarpana, you know where it goes. Prasadam. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sarvesham Swastirбhavatu Sarvesham Shantirbhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkhabhat Bhavet. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritangamaya. Om Tat Sat. The Vedic Dharma, the approach is not dogmatic. You may say the belief in Veda as valid knowledge is dogmatic. If it is dogmatic, in the sense, it is non-verifiable belief. Yes. The aspect that the Veda is pramana, Veda is not composed by anybody, Veda is given directly by Ishvara, is a non-verifiable belief. But it is not exactly like dogma, because dogma is something that is pushed down through your throat. If you don't believe that, you will not benefit from the Veda, that's all. You will benefit from common sense, you will benefit from perception, you will benefit from all the other pramanas, but you will not benefit from Veda as pramana. There are a lot of benefits that come if you look up to Veda as valid knowledge. Those benefits you will miss, that's all. But there is no negative result of not doing it. No. So, the approach to the whole Veda is for the sake of the welfare of the individual. This is a very important point, and it is agreed upon. These are universal philosophical assumptions and principles agreed upon by all the schools in the Vedic Dharma. The ritualistic school, the Advaita, the Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, they may all fight among themselves. All the Astika Darshanas. Astika Darshanas means the different schools of thought, if you want to say in English for the lack of better word, the different schools of thought that consider Veda as valid knowledge. There is a school of thought that considers Veda as valid knowledge but does not believe in God. It says there is no God. Nirishwara Sankhya. So this Nirishwara Sankhya does not accept God. It says there is no God. There is no this one absolute God and all this is nonsense. It doesn't exist. But Veda is Pramana. So I can discuss with the Advaitin, can discuss or have an argument with the Sankhya. But I cannot have an argument with somebody who does not believe in the Veda. Then I can have an argument about Veda is valid or not. Some kind of a logical argument can be had. But when these opponent schools are talking, there is one common ground. All of them are taking to the Shraddha that Veda is valid knowledge. So from that, the validity of Veda as a means of knowledge entitles these 3 points. Not available for other means of knowledge, not affected by other means of knowledge, or not available and not contradictory to the other means of knowledge, and it is useful. The usefulness is a very important point. Okay? So that's what he is saying. Shastra may not enjoin futile work as it is for pain. Pain need not be consciously striven for. So who would want to consciously work for pain? Nobody will want to work for that. So this position also implies self-contradiction. Having maintained that obligatory action yields no result, he is now driven to hold that it makes for liberation. Therefore, the verse means what we have explained. So, when the obligatory action produces no result, means it should be understood as the obligatory action, when it does not produce any tangible result in time, it produces the result of purity of the mind, which is conducive for liberation. That is the meaning given. So, when you do obligatory action selflessly without desire, as a dedication to the God, it gives you purity of mind, which makes it possible for the knowledge to occur. So, the intended meaning of this verse is self-knowledge only. Because of the virtue of self-knowledge, the person sees oneself as not doing anything, even while the mind and body is doing something. When the body and mind is not doing anything, it is not taken as I am not doing anything. It is also taken as a state of the body and mind only. So, a person does not consider oneself to be doing something or not doing something based on the state of body and mind. It only means one is not defining oneself based on the body and mind. One knows what is the true nature of the self. That is the meaning of the verse. And by this knowledge alone, all that needs to be accomplished can be accomplished by the person. So the next one. It is going, the greatness of this person who sees the nature of the self in the middle of all situations is talked about in the next verse. Yasya sarve samarambhaha kama sankalpa varjitaha jnanagnidaddha karmani tamahu panditam buddhaha. This person, the wise call as a man of discrimination, all of whose actions are free from the desire prompted thought patterns, and all of whose actions have been consumed in the fire of knowledge. So here the Puji Swamiji translation is more crisp. The one for whom all undertakings are free from desire and will, whose actions are burnt by the fire of knowledge, the sages call him as a wise person. So the commentary on this. यस्य यथोक्तदर्शिनः सर्वे भावन्तः सर्वे यावन्तः समारम्भाः सर्वाणि कर्माणि समारम्भन्ते इति समारम्भाः. This person who has the vision of the true nature of the self as the non-doer, okay, for this person, all actions are free from desire and the will to do. Sarva kama sankalpa varjitaha means kama sankalpa. Sankalpa means I want to do this, I want to achieve this. No, before the puja we do, no? Mao Parta Namasta Durgakshetwara Rameshwar Prityartham. Today I do this puja for the purpose of getting knowledge and discrimination and all that. On Friday puja we do. So this is called sankalpa. So every action before we do, either there is a conscious will to achieve something, or there is an unrecognized will that is prompting. Okay.
So this person does not have a personal will. How do you know that is an unrecognized will? When what you are doing is disturbed. No, you are just somehow doing something mindlessly. Suddenly there is a obstacle. You are not able to do that. And then you are not getting what you thought you wanted to get. You did not know that you are actually expecting this. And suddenly you are faced with some result which is completely against your subconscious expectation. But you suddenly discover yourself being frustrated. If you find yourself frustrated in the middle or in the end of action, when you face the result of action, that means knowingly or unknowingly you have entertained the will and you have entertained the desire. So this person who knows the true nature of oneself is free from desire and will to do anything. Kama sankalpa varjitaha. He does not have a desire to achieve anything, nor he has a desire to do anything. So this personalized will to do, personalized will to enjoy the result of action does not exist in this person who knows the true nature of oneself. Okay? Kama sankalpa varjitaha. Then they are performed without personal motives, being mere actions. Guna guneshu vartante. Qualities act on qualities. The different constituents of nature are acting on the other constituents of nature. I do nothing. So this vision is there. And for this person, can be of two categories. He can be an active person or he can be a sannyasi. He can be an active person involved in the society and all that. Or that person can be a sannyasi who is a renunciant mendicant who is not living a very active, busy life. So if that person is an active person, his actions promote worldly welfare, welfare for the world in general. It is for the welfare of the world and it does not produce any result of karma which is binding on him that causes transmigration. If the person is nivritti, if the person is devoted to renunciation, then his actions are only for the sake of maintaining the body, just for the sake of the maintenance of the body only. It does not produce any, it only exhausts the prarabdha karma. The remaining karma is exhausted in the action and it is serving the purpose of keeping the body alive till the allotted time. It is only for the survival of the body. And then Jnanagni Datta Karmani. So what is this fire of knowledge? His actions are consumed in the fire of knowledge, which means what? So what is the fire of knowledge? You think, you are sitting in concentration and then the flame of knowledge arises like a light in your spine and then shines here. And then you maintain that flame every day 3 hours and it is burning all the karmas. You have this new age workshop, burning your karma cleansing and all that. It's not like that. Burning the karma is an expression. Jnana Agni means it is like how the light dispels darkness. All that is imagined in the darkness disappears like that the moment light comes. All the action and the result of action are nothing but the idea that I am the doer, I am the enjoyer is based on ignorance. So the whole karmic structure wraps around the individual because of the ignorance, the power of ignorance. Jnana Agni means the power of knowledge, dispelling the ignorance, strikes at the very root of the structure of karma. The karma cannot structure around the individual because there is no individual. See, anything, I can bind somebody in space. In a given space, I can tie you up in a given space. Okay, I have locked you up in the room. Can I bind space? I built a room. Now I have bound this much of space. The space is laughing at me. Sir, where did you build the room before? You built the room in me. So the room itself is built in space. So room cannot bind the space. It is the space which provides space for the room. Right? So in the same way, the self cannot be bound by anything. It is the nature of the self being infinite. It is not bound by anything. Because of this knowledge, just by the very virtue of this knowledge, karma does not affect the person. Because karma anyway does not affect the self. I don't know this. I am imagining that I am the doer. I am the enjoyer, then I think that the karma is affecting me, good karma is giving me good result, bad karma is giving me bad result. These are all my imaginations. So when I understand what is my true nature, in that understanding there is freedom because my nature is freedom. Okay? So that is what means by, that is what is meant by
Jnana Agni Dagga Karmani. The fire of knowledge burns all karma. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you go into the heart chakra and take one karma and keep burning with some special mantra or something. It's not like that. Okay. And then the knowledge or the perception of not work in work, etc. Seeing actionlessness in action and action in actionlessness, which means seeing the true nature of the self amidst action or actionlessness of the body and mind. That seeing is like a fire. All his actions, good and bad, are consumed in this fire. This is the real person of discrimination. So say the wise, the knowers of Brahman. This is the statement of the knowers. All the knowers of the Brahman, all the enlightened masters say the same thing. That's what he says. So the next one is. Now he is adding some more point to that. What is the nature of this person who is free from the binding constraints of action? The one who is not identified with the doer and the enjoyer. The one who is not identified with the action, the organs of action, who is not owning up the auxiliaries of action, and the one who is not bound by the results of action. What is the nature of this person? He who habitually perceives, means who has internalized the knowledge and is able to naturally see non-action in action, etc. Just for the very reason of that knowledge, that person is unaffected by any action. That person is a renouncer, and his actions are meant just to maintain the life in the body. He does not work, though before the dawn of Viveka, before the dawn of knowledge, he might have been an active person. Before the dawn of knowledge, he might have considered himself as active or whatever. But once the knowledge has happened, in spite of he might have considered himself to be an active person, after the knowledge, he does not work. Okay, that means he is free from the illusion of I am working. And the next one. The person whose actions have begun to bear the fruit, that is, whose prarabdha is active, who later achieves the right perception of the self, will of course renounce all action with all their auxiliaries. He sees no profit in any action whatsoever. Purushartha shunyanam gunanam pratiprasavaha kaivalyam. Absence of purushartha. There is no target that is seen as worth achieving for this person. Just like how a millionaire does not want a billionaire, or the richest man on earth does not want to gain more money. In the sense, Dirghash. The richest man may not want to gain that little bit of money that a common man wants to gain. Okay. So what is all the different economic targets for the person who does not have enough prosperity? A person who considers I am prosperous enough, I will put like this. A person who considers I have enough prosperity. That person will not work for prosperity. I have had enough ice cream. When you say I have had enough ice cream, you will not look for ice cream. You may look for chocolate, but you will not look for ice cream. Okay? So if you consider something is enough, you will not look for it. But this person has realized the completeness of the self. So he knows I have achieved all that needs to be achieved. So if I have achieved all that needs to be achieved, what will I look for achieving? Nothing. Since there are no targets to be achieved, this person renounces all kinds of action, spiritual and material action, together along with the different auxiliaries of action. He sees no result, no worthy result to be achieved in any action whatsoever. If for some reason or the other, if that person happens to be active for the in the eyes of the people that see him, if for some reason or the other, if the person happens to be active, his continued performance of action is to be considered as for the welfare of the world only. If you think that he is acting, that jnani, the enlightened person, if you think that he is acting, it is only for the welfare of the world, not for his own result. There is no personal motive in action. Okay. So what will be the result? Then that action will produce result, yes, the welfare of the world. Not for him, nothing for him. It just contributes to the harmony, collective harmony. He has no personal end to serve. In truth, that person works not at all. All his actions have been burnt up in the fire of knowledge, and so the work has become non-work. Only to explain this idea, the Lord says in the next verse, Tyaktva karma phala sangaha nityatupto nirashrayaha
karmanyabhipravrittopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Giving up attachment to the results of action. Always content, not taking the support of anything. This person who is apparently, who might be engaged in any action, does nothing at all. This is the next verse in Bhagavad. त्यक्त्वा कर्मसु अभिमानं फलासंगः च यथोक्तेन ज्ञानेन नित्यतृप्तः निराकाङ्क्षो विषयेषु इत्यर्थः. This person who gives up त्यक्त्वा कर्मसु अभिमानं, he gives up the notion that I am the doer. Karmasu abhimanam means the sense of doership in action. He gives up the sense of doership in action. Here, the translation says he who gives up conceit. It's a very difficult word. Basically, abhimanam means the idea that I am doing something. He gives up the idea that I am doing something. And who is ever content simply by the virtue of the knowledge, as already explained till now. The person is content just by the virtue of knowledge. Atmanyevatmana santushtaha. He is content on the self by the self alone through the light of the self-knowledge. Okay? This person is free from all kinds of dependence. If you remember, when we studied Tattva Bodha, long back, when we studied Tattva Bodha, I talked about 5 kinds of results that come from self-knowledge. One of the 5 results is Paratantra Nivritti. Not depending upon external factors for the sake of any kind of gratification. Emotional, spiritual, material, you are not dependent on anything for the sake of a satisfaction. So your happiness, your contentment is not dependent on anything. You are, whether the hunger may be satisfied or not satisfied, the satisfaction or the non-satisfaction even of bodily urges like hunger is not taken upon as something belonging to oneself. The hunger is satisfied, hunger is satisfied. Hunger is not satisfied, hunger is not satisfied. I am not the one who is satisfied or not satisfied. Okay? So it is complete non-identification with the organism. So this person does not depend upon his satisfaction or happiness on anything external. First of all, there is nothing external. If you say something is external, he is not dependent upon that. And then he is free from all dependence. Dependence refers to the external means relying on which goals are sought to be reached. Because there is a reliance upon external means, the people are striving to get some goal in time, purushartha. Now the people are pursuing different purusharthas because of a fundamental perception of limitation about oneself. Because I find myself to be limited, I want to supplement my limitation through doing some charity, or through doing some virtuous action, or through achieving wealth, or through achieving some pleasure, or through achieving moksha. So even a person looking for liberation is looking for something because he considers himself to be bound. The person who is liberated means he has nothing to achieve, not even liberation. In Nirvana Shakatam comes, Shankaracharya 6 verses on the nature of the self. I have no dharma, I have no artha, I have no kama, I have no moksha. I have no friends, I have no relatives, there is no guru, there is no student. All this comes in that Nirvana Shakatam, that 6 verses. The Shivoham, Shivoham, Chidananda, Shivoham, Shivoham, that verse. Okay? So, the work done by the knower is in reality non-work. The work done by the knower of the self means, if you say he is not the doer, then how come there is work done by him for the perception of others? For in the eyes of the others who perceive the body of the Jivan Mukta, they say Ramana Maharshi made upma, good upma. Ramana Maharshi was supposed to make good upma, especially with some onion also, on the day when people are doing, on the new moon day when they are doing ritual for the ancestor. That is the day you are supposed to maintain a super strict diet. You are not even supposed to look at onion. Forget eating onion. So that day Ramana Maharshi made one upma. It's one dish. Okay? Like a pudding, salt-based pudding, in grease in below. So they made this, he made that pudding, and that day after finishing all the rituals, they came and ate that. Oh, Bhagavan, today the upma is very tasty.
What did he do? Oh, I have a special recipe, you eat, I'll tell you later. So after they finished eating, he said, I smashed onion separately and then I added it in this manner during the seasoning. So that gives a special flavor to the upma. That is why it is so tasty. What? You put onion, and they started jumping, and then he was laughing. Ha 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 ha, ha. You and your rituals, you know. So Ramana Maharshi, yes, it is another story. But because Ramana Maharshi cooked upma with onion, now all the Ramana devotees eat onion day and day. Bhagavan himself cooked onion. It is like Ramakrishna ate fish, so I will also eat fish. Vivekananda ate meat once in a while, so I will also eat meat. No, that is like so. Vivekananda, if he sits in meditation, there will be 1,000 mosquitoes on his body. He will not even move 1 inch for 2 days at a stretch. Can you do that? You can't do that. But I can eat some fish. So this is easy. So this people, they try to mimic the enlightened person's actions. It will not work. So you have to take the teaching and keep quiet. That is why a traditional teacher, who is called as Acharya, they take care of certain rules also for the purpose of honoring the tradition. For example, if you have this Shankaracharya, who is considered as a traditional teacher, that Shankaracharya will follow all the rules even though the person has self-knowledge. He need not follow any rule, but he will follow all the rules for setting an example for the society because he is in the position of Shankaracharya. The whole society looks up to Shankaracharya as a benchmark, not only for jnana but also for dharma. So he has to set an example. So Acharya Swayam Acharati Paran Acharayati. He follows by himself and he also makes others follow. That is Acharya. He walks the talk, that's what they say. So the one who has an Acharya attains the purpose which is given in the Veda. Acharyavan Purusho Vedaha. He attains the knowledge of the self, they say. Acharya is a different category. So an enlightened person may do a lot of things or may not do anything. So for the onlooker, the one who is seeing, Ramana Maharshi seems to be very busy. But he is doing nothing. Even though the person may be doing something, he is doing nothing. Even though the person may be appearing to simply sit, the person is not simply sitting. He is not bound by doing or not doing. That is the idea here. Because there is no identification with the body and the mind complex. Due to the desire to promote the world's welfare, this is the translation, let me see. Samprayojana abhavat sasadhanam karma parityaktam eva iti prapte tataha nirgama sambhavat loka sangraha chikirshaya. Loka sangraha, you should not consider it as the desire to promote the world's welfare. Okay, it is not desire to promote the world's welfare. There is a natural dedication to the welfare of the world. Because the mind is highly sattvic. How is this? For the sake of promoting the desire, because he has a desire to promote the welfare of the world, he finds no way out of activity, or maybe this person wants to avoid the censure of the great, righteous, learned people. So he may, as was his own before self-realization, continue to work. Still he works on, for he knows his identity with the work of himself. So this jnani, the knower of the self, might be doing action, either for the welfare of the world or for respecting the tradition. For respecting the tradition, he may be doing some action. Now, why the person has the desire to promote the welfare of the world? That means the person is seeing two things. Self means one without a second. Then where is the word? You may ask. Correct. So, why do you say he is promoting, he is desirous to promote the welfare of the world? It means the mind, it is to be understood like this. The mind of a jnani is highly sattvic mind. When the mind is highly sattvic and the mind is still available, it is there. The mind has not disintegrated completely. That means the person is still alive. The body-mind complex is still alive, but it is backed by a very high level of sattva guna, the sattvic quality. The mind becomes like a mirror. And it becomes like a mirror of the collective will. Individual will or collective will always works for its own stability and welfare. Even a person who wants to commit suicide is committing suicide for his own welfare, only that his idea of welfare has gone the other way around. But the person commits suicide to become free from something that is terrible and cannot be borne. Only that does not understand that suicide will not deliver what I want. He doesn't understand that. But even a person who apparently wants to hurt oneself is not hurting oneself for the sake of hurting. Is hurting oneself because the person thinks I will get something good out of this hurting. The understanding has become very tamasic. That is why. So when the mind is very sattvic and it is reflecting the collective will, the mind becomes available for the sake of the collective automatically. It is the nature of the sattvic mind. It is the nature of the sattvic mind to be available for the welfare of everything that is around. There was a saint in Tamil Nadu, his name is Vallala. He says, whenever I see a plant that has become dry, withered, whenever I see a withered plant, my heart withers. He says that. Whenever I saw a plant that has withered, my heart withers. That means that compassion, So that becomes a vehicle of compassion automatically. It is a natural quality of a sattvic mind. Suppose if you are maintaining a very disciplined life and you have a good diet, do pranayama, meditation, and you keep your mind in a very serene mode, you will see without any effort you will get the emotions of empathy and compassion without any effort. You don't need to. So all you need to do is to keep your mind in good shape, in good sattva. Automatically you will feel empathy and compassion for everything. And you will somehow have a tendency to contribute something positive to others and to people around and to the society, or to something that you that is of value in your understanding. It is a natural quality of a sattvic mind. So a jnani being a sattvic person, automatically the mind is available for the welfare of all. So the actions are done for the welfare of the world, or to respect the opinion of the learned people. Means the learned people is called kritajnatvam, expression of gratitude to the tradition. Why to respect the attitude? Why to respect the opinion of the learned people? The learned people, the ones who are learned in the Vedas. Why to respect their opinion? Because the person has arrived at the jnana through the help of the tradition. So there is a sense of gratitude towards the Guru and the teaching tradition. So to respect the tradition and the dignity of the tradition, the person may do certain actions that are in keeping with that spirit. The person, even though the person is doing for this reason, he actually does no work because he sees the nature of the self as the one that does nothing. He knows I am the Atma, which is not the doer. In this vision, all the action of the body and the mind goes on. So the person is considered not to do anything because he does not identify with the doer. He is not doing. On the contrary, the renunciate who prior to any undertaking has had the realization as his self of the work-free Brahman, that is the innermost indweller, remains loyal to the discipline, remains committed to the discipline of knowledge. He desires no objective good, seen or unseen, and does nothing at all. Notes that all work directed to end seen or unseen is useless. He renounces all actions while maintaining a bare bodily existence and is liberated. Now he is talking about another dimension to this quality. Suppose if the person, before getting